Stranger Things Season 5 has sparked a divisive reaction, largely thanks to its flawed writing and how outrageous it gets. Some people may argue that the show has always been silly, but Season 4 course corrects into a darker, more serious tone, raising the general expectation of quality for Season 5. For this video, we're going to go on a chronological marathon, addressing and diving into every problematic aspect of these episodes, while having some fun on the way. There will of course be spoilers, I'll recap elements of the story if you haven't watched the season, and get nice and cozy because this is basically 8 movies worth of material. To start this devoid of logic odyssey, let's first tackle the biggest fish in this ocean of problems, and that's the sheer inconsistency and confusion when it comes to the show's world and canon. Generally, everything revolving around how the Upside Down works, its internal logic, and the rules established by the writers. Even the first scene of the season where Will gets hunted down by the Demogorgon sent by Vecna contradicts Season 1, because in that season, the Demogorgon was portrayed as an independent monster that went around killing people, harkening back to classic monster horror movies. However, Season 5 is like, nope, it was always controlled by Vecna. This now inadvertently raises a lot of questions like, why would Vecna want to kill characters like Barb? In that specific moment, did the Demogorgon have its own autonomy? If so, then why aren't there a bunch of Demogorgons running around ransacking Hawkins or the Upside Down when Vecna isn't using them? Is he locking them into a basement in the abyss and refusing to let them out? This is just one example of the many inconsistencies, and to tackle the biggest one before moving on, let's address the Mind Flayer. A common problem within Season 5 was the Mind Flayer being MIA until the very end, additionally to a point that completely muddles its objective in past seasons. Remember the ending of Season 2 where the gaseous form of the Mind Flayer was trying to escape through the big rift, but Elle stopped it? Well, why isn't it trying to do that in Season 5? A massive rift opened up in Hawkins at the end of Season 4, so it could easily achieve that objective with practically no opposition, allowing the Mind Flayer to mind control the entire city and kidnap the kids that way. It very much feels like the Duffer Brothers had no solution for how to overcome the Mind Flayer in its non-physical form, so they opted to just delete that version of it from the narrative. This leads into another major problem in the beginning of Season 5 where the Duffer Brothers entirely revert the status quo to being back to normal. Even to a comical extent where the military literally just puts a metal band-aid on the entirety of the rift, which in of itself is pretty insane for the sheer amount of metal required to do this. That's miles of square feet, but like, is that really enough to stop another dimension from leaking into our world? The end of Season 4 shows that our environment is withering away and changing. There's red lightning now, and the insinuation seemed to be that the Upside Down was bleeding into Hawkins. However, all of that is solved with some flex tape. Now, from what we learned in Part 2, these rifts need to be in place so that the Abyss can smash down into our world, but again, the Duffer Brothers are very much nerfing the opposition by not taking advantage of this vast access into our world. From this point, we learned that all of the kids are back in school, and Hawkins as a whole has pretty much returned to normal, along with the entire population somehow not knowing what's going on. The military does hand-wave it away with propaganda by saying that the rifts were just a bad earthquake, but how would that excuse the snow and red lightning emanating out of this huge abyss? Not to mention the military quarantining Hawkins. At the very least, these people should be suspicious of something weird going on. I wonder why the military is putting metal panels over this earthquake. That's not something you do. Shh, don't pay attention to that. We still want school drama, so let's have the entirety of Hawkins stick their heads into the sand. Murray becomes Santa Claus, and this entire development feels like a convenient way to give our characters exactly what they need at any given time. This isn't necessarily devoid of logic, and instead it glosses over the practical limitation of what the characters should have access to, unleashing a plot device that functions as an unlimited well of resources. At least though, they are tongue-in-cheek about it. So the main objective that everyone universally has is working together on a crawl. In other words, sneaking into a military truck as it drives through the main portal in town for the Upside Down, and Hopper will then search a sector in the hopes of finding Vecna. Right away, this feels needlessly convoluted considering that El can just temporarily rip off a metal band-aid and send someone into the Upside Down. That's literally what they start doing later on. Not only would that decrease the risk factor significantly, it would also make it way easier to track Hopper, and this would allow them to do crawls whenever they want. Having to wait an artificial amount of time for a military supply run feels like a way to stall out the narrative so that the Duffer Brothers can pick up the story more than a year later, when in reality, they can pop into the Upside Down whenever they want. Holly Wheeler, Mike's sister, is now a much more integral character because she's one of the 12 kids being targeted by Henry Creel. Since the Duffer Brothers create this odd plot mechanic where Vecna needs 12 children's collective brain power to smash the Abyss down into our world. And if you're watching this video right now not having seen the season, the Upside Down is a wormhole connecting our world to the Abyss, a different planet. Hopefully that context clears things up. Needing 12 kids to do that is quite a weird premise, and I don't know why the Mind Flayer, a Lovecraftian being with unimaginable raw power, doesn't have the ability to do that on its own, but anyways, pedophile Thanos is coming for your kids. So going back to Holly, why would you target a kid who's related to Mike Wheeler when you have a lot of other options? This naturally will lead to a point of conflict where you drastically raise the chance of your opposition figuring out that you're targeting them, along with the fact that she's for some reason the first child. It feels as though the Duffer Brothers needed it to be Holly first, so that our characters could naturally unravel this mystery, when if it realistically wasn't Holly first, they would have gotten completely blindsided. However, it does take them a comical amount of time to figure this out while also gaslighting Holly.
Monsters aren't real, Holly.
I don't believe you.
Season 4 clearly established that Vecna's victims would hallucinate, and now that your sister is reporting a creepy guy is stalking her, and that guy is claiming that there are monsters in Hawkins when there are, that should be a major red flag. And there's even a new development where Will has a strange vision / sensation.
Mike thinks it could mean that maybe Vecna's close, that he's finally reemerged.
Mike himself thinks that Vecna is back. Adding these two pieces of information together should confirm this theory and puts Holly in danger. And it's not like Mike is a dumb character or anything. He should have the brain power to figure this out. Our characters are simultaneously badass geniuses and idiots at the same time. The only way for Nancy and Mike to solve this mystery is for Karen to literally spell it out for them. Another silly development in the first episode is the military building a base in the Upside Down. Considering how strong Vecna and his League of Demogorgons are, he could essentially incur no losses by sending a few Demogorgons to wipe everyone out. Or just the Mind Flayer taking over the entirety of the military base. That might be pretty useful. So, for Vecna's motivation here, why would you allow your enemy to research and gain more information regarding the Upside Down? Like, Vecna's lack of action here allows our protagonist to figure out that this is a wormhole and there's exotic matter in the center of it, and if you explode it, it collapses the wormhole. You'd think this would be a dire priority to defend because it should be assumed that this would be a target. It easily accomplishes the goal of shutting out the Abyss. The fact that Vecna doesn't care about protecting this, and let alone people discovering things, utterly decimates the danger and tension that used to permeate in the Upside Down. The only possible explanation for Vecna to not care is if he's also unaware of this. But with how much the Mind Flayer has been in the Upside Down and it knowing that there are two separate worlds, I feel like it should be partially assumed that it knows mostly everything. And even if it technically didn't know, changing that indirectly fixes other problems. Dustin visits Eddie's grave since he's still self-destructing a year and a half later, and is ambushed by the Jocks. They beat the shit out of him and then continue to kick him on the ground. Given that the bullies say this is where Dustin will die, and then we don't see Dustin for almost an hour of screen time, a part of me actually thought he died. But the crazy thing here is that Dustin's only injuries is a bloody nose and a bruise on his face. You may think I'm nitpicking here, but the issue is more the consequences of his actions. Dustin is riling up and fighting these violent figures. One of them was trying to kill his friends last season. These jocks were out to hurt him, and he definitely sustained graver injuries than a bloody nose. Obviously though, it would be an interesting writing choice, crippling one of your characters in the first episode, and thankfully, Dustin's jacket is made out of plot armor. During the crawl, a Demogorgon ambushes the convoy, and given what's set up where it explicitly has the goal to kidnap Holly, I don't know why it's bothering with taking out all the soldiers, unless Vecna is now changing his mind in terms of not ignoring them anymore. It's also pretty cute that the Demogorgon ignores and spares Hopper, despite it killing all of the soldiers, and out of all the plot armor scenarios, this is sadly the most tame. Will also now has the ability to see what Vecna sees when he's hijacking another host. Of course, like the many new introduced rules and mechanics, this is very inconsistently enforced where Will in future scenes isn't seizing on the ground when the Demogorgons are in play.
It is an honor to witness you writhing around in immense pain.
The Duffer Brothers only use this power when the plot demands it and to give our characters specific information at specific times. Holly gets jump scared by the Demogorgon, and literally within seconds, the Demogorgon can just grab and take Holly through the portal. It doesn't have a reason to knock her around the room. Skipping ahead to the more iconic moment though, we have the infamous Karen Wheeler soloing a Demogorgon with a broken wine bottle. Not only would the Demogorgon immediately steamroll through Karen, it also just stands still for half a minute, letting her flurry attack it with the wine bottle.
28 stab wounds. You didn't want to leave him a chance, huh? He was bleeding, begging you for mercy.
What makes this moment even funnier is that assault rifles don't even faze them, but a wine bottle happens to be their kryptonite, alongside fire. Thankfully, the Demogorgon doesn't die here, unlike later, and Karen sustains some life-ending injuries to say the least.
Now I feel like I don't know how I survived.
You should be dead. It's a miracle. Too much? I think
For the first one, she flat out gets disemboweled. Her intestines would be spilling onto the floor, and she'd most definitely be dead from this injury alone. Then, on top of that fun time, her throat gets gouged out. So now, there's even an abyss in her neck. To clarify what would happen next, she'd be suffocating in her blood that's gushing out everywhere while her intestines decorate the floor like balloon party animals. I'm not a doctor, but it'd be pretty miraculous for her to survive the next few minutes, let alone getting to the hospital alive. Don't worry, mother, I'm applying pressure to the ravine in your neck that no longer has the carotid artery. I have stopped the bleeding.
The evolution to being an action hero is the natural progression for me. I think maybe that's all I ever wanted to do.
Elle follows the Demogorgon through the portal, and while running through the forest, she chances across Hopper. That's a pretty crazy coincidence considering how big Hawkins is, and since this character pairing is required in the narrative, it comes across as a contrivance. After they get their bearings, they discover that the Demogorgon is bleeding, and now as an audience, it makes more sense why it idly stood still and got shanked to death. The Duffer Brothers needed a way for Elle and Hopper to track it, and this was unfortunately the only solution they could come up with.
You're not gonna believe this, but she still won't give us a timeline on seeing Mom.
I'm glad that you guys are worried about your dad. I don't know if this is an intentional inside joke that the Duffer Brothers are pulling here about forgetting Ted, because it's either that or they comically forgot about him. Mike and Nancy bust into Karen's room just hours after her surgery to question her about Mr. Whatsit, Holly's imaginary friend. Given the extent of Karen's wounds, the fact that she's even awake is a miracle, let alone being lucid enough to communicate with her kids. In the grand scheme of things, this scene isn't necessary at all. Mike and Nancy should be able to come to this conclusion on their own through critical thinking, alongside Will and Robin also figuring it out. This is redundant development, and the Duffer Brothers are infusing ridiculous plot points for no reason. So, now that Vecna has kidnapped Holly, he starts his manipulation of tricking her into loving his idyllic paradise. From a premise standpoint, this doesn't work at all because Holly has been aged up to about 10 years old. At that age, it's absolute insanity to willingly accept getting kidnapped by someone who clearly looks like a sex offender. I know there's a general stigma that, haha, kids are dumb, but not to this level and not at that age. This breaks common sense and reasoning. The only way this would possibly work is if Vecna's actively brainwashing Holly at all times. But that's not the case because she has her own agency. Henry only says that the transition process can leave her mind foggy as to how she got here, and he has to actively convince her to stay. Which should be impossible because she has a life, family, and home she'd probably want to return to. This monster propaganda shouldn't work on someone who's almost in middle school. The only other way for this plot point to stick is if Holly was under 5 years old and was in like preschool. Then it'd be more buyable bribing kids with candy, and even then, kids at that age will still miss their parents. So the Duffer Brothers doing the opposite and aging up Holly while also having an actor that looks even older than the part they're playing utterly nukes the believability of this whole scenario. And the crazy thing here is, this gets exponentially worse later on. Elle and Hopper find the huge wall of the Upside Down, and looking back at this scene, it's pretty neat from what we learn later that the Demogorgon actually climbed to the top, and not what we insinuated in it tunneling through. Anyways though, this actual scene is casually really silly from a pure coincidence perspective. So they track the Demogorgon to this spot, and it just so happens that the military decided to recon this exact location and stop to take a break here. Pretty big coincidence, and it doesn't stop there because Hopper just decided to stab the wall and leave his knife there without taking it back, basically throwing it away for no reason, and this allows the military to figure out that someone is here by them also just randomly peeing next to it, leading to this crucial engagement that sends the story in a specific direction. Generally, one coincidence is sometimes acceptable if it isn't constantly happening in every scene, but to have multiple coincidences transpire in a single moment really highlights how forced the writing is. Having discovered that someone is here, Hopper decides to open fire on the military. For whatever reason, the soldiers don't immediately return fire and give Hopper a very considerate 30 seconds to get behind cover before they shoot back. In any normal scenario, they'd fire back instantly because their lives are in mortal danger, and if this happened, Hopper would have obviously died. Maybe this whole story is actually a D&D campaign because that would explain the rampant plot armor on display this season, where Mike casts a spell of perpetual protection that liquefies the brains of all of their enemies. Going back to the scene, thankfully Hopper has his cabbage grenades, and this gives him enough of an advantage to overcome the soldiers. Pretty lucky that he happened to receive those on the 30th something crawl where things went wrong, but at this point, it seems like the default state of writing is it being wholly contrived. After kidnapping one of the soldiers, Hopper says this.
What he will know, though, is the schedule for the next supply convoy, which is our way out of this hellhole.
Or, hear me out guys, go to the rift and have 11 force push off one of the metal band-aids. Just a thought, but if our characters realistically did that, then we wouldn't have them infiltrating the military base later. This is annoying because they even escape via this method in episode 6. It's as if these characters are brainwashed by the Duffer Brothers to do their bidding, even if it clashes with their inherent motivations. Also, it's kind of funny in this scene with Elle insisting that the soldier knows something about the wall because he peed on it, which is just such a weird line of reasoning.
You're loading my telemetry tracker into a shotgun shell in what I presume are the hopes of firing it into an interdimensional being. If the heat from the exploding gunpowder doesn't destroy the transmitter, the force from the recoil will.
At least the writers are calling out the absurdity of this point with Murray's fun energy because, yeah, shooting a small electronic out of a gun is obviously working off of Looney Tunes logic. The overall plan here is to bait Derek and ambush an arriving Demogorgon, since Vecna can see through Derek, and in order to capture him and use him as bait, the gang is gonna knock his family unconscious. Addressing the first point of this plan, it's insane that Erica and everyone else received no consequences in the end for poisoning a family and kidnapping a child. The parents would ideally press charges in any sane reality. The Duffer Brothers seemingly expect the audience to forget about this, and I feel like they intentionally shifted the tone to be more silly in this scene, so that the audience don't expect any consequences. But that's kind of cheap writing because the overall show definitely takes itself seriously and has some stakes. Copping out and invalidating any form of punishment highlights that your characters are not in danger, and this applies to everything and not just the family not pressing charges. Unless if they forgot to let them go and they died of starvation in the barn. We leave no witnesses. And sorry, Derek, it turns out that your family was killed by the Demogorgon. Then we have the titular scene of everyone home aloneing the Demogorgon, and all this scene does is dismantle how scary the Demogorgon used to be. Putting this monster into a scenario where kids basically bully it is baffling. Dead. Lucas here dies. And this moment highlights an annoying motif where whenever the Demogorgon can kill a character, it opts to instead scream at them. However, this rule only applies to notable characters because anyone without a name gets killed instantly. The gang successfully implants the tracker and sets the poor boy on fire, and since the hive mind goes crazy in the presence of fire, wouldn't the Demogorgon basically be charred toast here? It's on fire for 20 whole seconds, and it pieces out as if it wasn't affected by anything. Even in episode 4, the pure sensation of fire cripples everything connected to the hive mind. Just casually another rule the Duffer Brothers decide to break for the convenience of the plot. Delightful Derek slips his hood and notifies Vecna that he's in the only barn in Hawkins. The Demogorgon arrives, and since Karen had her moment in the spotlight, it would be unfair to not give Joyce the same opportunity. So, the ferocious and terrifying Joyce Byers drives the Demogorgon back, instilling it with fear. Instead of it, swiping at her with its long reach and killing her. But that's not possible from the sheer amount of aura emanating out of Joyce, pushing the demo to a point of wetting his pants as it steps outside, and by insane inexplicable timing, Steve Harrington happened to just be flooring it at the door and runs into the Demogorgon. That wasn't even coordinated, and he was somehow there at that exact moment of time. Good thing no one else was backing out of the barn. This moment even establishes that physical contact injures Will, by the way. I wonder if that now means that when the demos were getting lit up by assault rifles in episode 4, Will had the sensation of getting shredded alive, and naturally this never comes up again. Basically the Duffer Brothers special. Clearly and obviously outmatched, the demo decides to throw in the towel and leaves. That stationary car is just too threatening, man. I shouldn't jump on it like in episode 1 and kill everyone in the car and then take Derek. They need Derek for next episode. I'm not allowed to do that. Steve and the gang spontaneously decide to drive into the Upside Down in pursuit of the Demogorgon. Making choices under duress can lead to bad decision making, so I guess they forgot about the fact that they wouldn't realistically have an easy way out of the Upside Down. While driving after the demo, Dustin and Steve get into a well-timed argument, and it gets so heated to the point that Steve needs to take his eyes off the road to talk to Dustin, and he's flooring it, by the way. Nancy and Jonathan in the back desperately try to notify Steve that he's about to run into something, but he's too caught up in the drama, baby. T overrides everything in this car. So, yet again, another group getting stranded here is a forced plot point. Going back over to Will, he sees brief flashes of Vecna's lair, and this moment is confusing because we're detached from Vecna's perspective here. Like, why is Will seeing this right now? Vecna's currently controlling the Demogorgon, by the way. It's as if the Duffer Brothers are stretching the rules of Will's new power to artificially give him critical information that we shouldn't be receiving. Now that multiple kids have gone missing, the military steps in and brings all 72 9 to 10-year-olds in Hawkins to the barracks of their base. The remaining characters not in the Upside Down decide to plan a jailbreak and save the kids being targeted by Vecna.
The north tunnel of the Max Z runs right underneath the barracks.
Lucky break.
Bound to happen one of these days.
That line wouldn't annoy me so much if it wasn't for every scene overflowing with lucky breaks.
All before anyone notices they're gone.
Dick.
What?
What? And personally, for us, I like Dick.
What even is this writing, man?
Well, that's a lovely plan, but isn't it a tad...
Mission Impossible-y.
I see that Lucas is making a Mission Impossible reference, despite it coming out in the 90s, 9 years after the season takes place. Seems like an easily avoidable oversight in a scene where the writers are already referencing a bunch of movies. The conclusion our characters come to in this scene is using Delightful Derek as an inside agent to get kids to escape. Back in the Upside Down, Elle and Hopper are planning to infiltrate the military base, and in this scene, Elle makes the observation that lightning strikes every 7 seconds. The issue right away is that you're now inviting the audience to easily measure the consistency of this new rule, because unsurprisingly, in other scenes, the lightning does in fact not hit every 7 seconds. Like one example of many being Elle and Hopper's dialogue scene on the train tracks, not showing any lightning flashes for 30 seconds. So the weird thing here is the Duffer Brothers are adding yet another rule to their world that is immediately contradicted by its surrounding scenes, all to serve a purpose to mask Elle's loud noise of jumping into the military base, when instead, you can just write it to where Elle simply bends the thin metal chain link fence with her telekinesis, something she should be able to do considering she lifts and throws a massive boulder in the finale. While discussing this plan, Hopper suddenly gets a call from Dustin informing him that they're also stuck down there. He tells them to stay put, and instead they basically say, "Nah, I'ma do my own thing." It turns out that Max has been stuck in Henry's mind for the last year and a half, and she rescues Holly from Henry's grasp. In this episode, she basically has to deliver a half hour of exposition detailing everything that's happened. From a writing perspective, I feel like it would be way more interesting if you instead opened the episode with a flashback of Max originally being marooned in Henry's mind, operating more as a mini tense horror movie, instead of what it is now where Max explains all of this for a really long time. Kind of falling into the Netflix trope where you constantly need to explain to the audience what's happening. Devoid of logic wise, Max at one point almost gets out and is found by Henry and is chased all throughout his memories. I'm personally confused because I don't know if it's Max's plot armor that's forcing Henry to not use his telekinesis, or if Henry doesn't have powers in his own mind. Like, I'm pretty sure it's shown later that he has his powers here. I don't know. It seems like a weird development, and staring at Vecna just outside of the cave shouldn't technically keep you safe because he can force pull you out. While inside the military compound, there's a handful of small nitpicky moments, but the main thing in this scene that's very perplexing is the complete lack of soldiers. In this base, there's seemingly only 4 present. For being in the Upside Down and possibly getting jumped by Demogorgons at any moment, you'd think this place would be heavily guarded and fortified. However, if that was the case, then Hopper and Elle would definitely not be able to extract Callie. And for her, why would the military keep Callie in the Upside Down? Why wouldn't you keep her in a safer area? Ideally, not even in Hawkins in some unknown location, let alone in a base with a few soldiers to guard her. The only reason why it seems like the way it is that the Duffer Brothers tried really hard to do a fake out where they made the characters think Vecna was in there to create a big twist when it was actually Callie. Whoa, Callie, how are you here? I don't fucking know, man. The gang on the right side up eventually gets caught during their heist, and Vecna deploys his Demogorgons. This scene is obviously extremely flawed, and the first noticeable problem is that of crossfire. So many of these soldiers are pointing their guns at each other while shooting the demos to the point that there'd be way more friendly fire damage. Someone even posted a clip from the recent Naked Gun remake highlighting Crossfire, and when that movie applies more realism in certain areas than Stranger Things, then we're pretty cooked. Partially relating to this, some soldiers in the background are clearly shooting way too high into the sky. Now, managing a lot of extras as a director and AD is pretty daunting because this is a very technically challenging sequence to accomplish. But some of this is just so comical that I'm surprised no one corrected these issues. Or surely someone raised the issue of Crossfire, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Duffer Brothers didn't care.
We do not care.
Secondly, another big problem is the Demogorgons being unfazed by getting shot by dozens of soldiers. This creates a massive contrast where the Duffer Brothers are now insinuating that a wine bottle is more useful against a Demogorgon than an M16 assault rifle. This kind of stems into a wider issue where this military outpost has been studying and identifying the weaknesses of these organisms. They specifically know that heat and fire are their kryptonite, so why not use something like incendiary rounds? Those were invented back in 1916 and were even used during the World Wars. Those would definitely be extremely effective, but I guess their only countermeasure is a whopping 2 flamethrowers. You can technically make a compelling argument that they may have not encountered these beasts before, so they thought assault rifles would work, which I could honestly buy. But that stems back into the issue of the Upside Down being a barren wasteland, with no monsters present. And even then, everything they've studied implies that they need heat to injure these monsters. Then, the last thing before Vecna shows up, people have mentioned this scene highlights the plot armor of the characters, and out of all the offenses, I can understand the Demogorgons prioritizing taking out the soldiers because they have weapons. The bigger danger, of course, is getting hit by all the stray bullets that are flying around since they're standing in the middle of this battleground. Thanos arrives, and this time he has impenetrable plot armor, where he's basically like a telekinetic-infused Groot now. And he rolls all the soldiers. When it comes to the characters though, they can live. Joyce definitely won't be a threat for later. For Will though, there's essentially no reason for Vecna to spare him. Will's been spying on Vecna, which he may not know about, but they have to be getting intel from somewhere given their plans surrounding Derek. Vecna even seems like he thinks Will is weak and inferior, so I really don't know why he lets him live. Maybe he's sentimental? Who knows? The real reason though is that the Duffer Brothers wanted a hype moment where Will suddenly unlocks a new power and allows him to siphon Vecna's abilities and can use telekinesis on anything connected to the hive mind, saving everyone simultaneously. This ability seems like a pretty significant and powerful leap from getting visions and sensations from the hive mind, but whatever. He has this power now via the will of the Duffer Brothers, based pretty much on vibes. This is a fictional story at the end of the day, so they can introduce whatever they want, but sometimes it can be a bit confounding. Also, as a side note, Lucas fucking died. Again.
Right, I'll do you for that. You what? Come here. What are you gonna do, bleed on me? I'm invincible!
Part 2 time, and we're already off to a great start of all the kids celebrating their kidnapping. The fact that not a single kid besides Derek and Holly at all question anything or feel any ounce of suspicion towards Henry breaks the believability of this plot. Tricking one child? Maybe. Still pretty implausible. 12 though? That's absurdly pushing it. And more annoyingly, this is such an easily avoidable problem by just making these kids younger. Unless if the Duffer Brothers genuinely think that kids of this age are that dim-witted. Another puzzling thing here is, why does Vecna give them free access around the house and the option to leave? This inherently would easily reward any rebellious child to run away. This very lax and loose approach allows Holly to escape. So why not put them in like a jail, or at the very least, lock the doors of the house so they can't get away? Does Vecna really need their cooperation? All they do in the end is hold hands, and it seems like Vecna uses their combined power, or whatever that entails. Or even another realistic approach is instead of being this fake, unbelievable good guy, he threatens to kill all of their families if they don't cooperate. That may sound very morbid, but he already did that.
Oh shit.
That's just a scratch.
At this point, the Duffer Brothers are now even declawing the demos as if they're poor kitties because their finger-like claws are like half a foot long. Bro would have gotten Karen Wheelered. In this episode, the gang comes up with a plan to reactivate a dead Demogorgon by shocking it so that Will can access the hive mind and try to kill Vecna. Coincidentally, at the exact time they do this, down to the literal second, they save Max from getting killed by Henry. The chances of these two uncoordinated micro moments coinciding together is such an insane statistical anomaly. Let's say about 6 hours have passed since the end of episode 4, since quite a bit happens. For those 6 hours, that would equate to 21,600 seconds. So that would be a 0.004% chance of these two moments happening together in time. And that's only limiting this window to 6 hours because Holly and Max could have technically tried escaping much earlier. Quite the lucky break, you could say. Before moving on, I also don't know what's stopping Will from simply snapping Vecna's neck instead of his leg. Like, he's already twisting his head. What if he kept doing that? I know that's a forehead thing to say, and this would lead to an unceremonious death of Vecna, but that's just the inherent issue of power scaling for Will now that we're dealing with. Steve, Dustin, Nancy, and Jonathan make it to Hawkins' lab, and according to Dustin's current theory, he thinks there's a shield generator here that's powering Vecna's walls. If that was correct, shouldn't it be assumed that this location would be well guarded and they should wait for backup? They have no idea what they're walking into, and it seems overly and idiotically reckless. Then on top of this, the writers employ the cliche of characters airing out their grievances while in a dangerous environment. The reason why this is a negative cliche is people realistically wouldn't air out drama in this context. Their lives are on the line. What if they alert something nearby? Which should have happened, by the way, because during Dustin and Steve's fight, they're crashing into hive mind tendrils. Which, to remind the Duffer Brothers what they introduced in season 4, touching these alerts the hive mind.
Wait, watch out for the vines. It's all a hive mind.
Telling Vecna that, hey, there are people here that are about to discover the exotic matter. Maybe you should send a demo. As a result of this fight between Dustin and Steve, they break their radio, and given this development, I think this was really the only reason for why they had a physical altercation. So they couldn't warn Nancy to not shoot the exotic matter. After shooting it, it emits 2 energy-esque waves that knocks them down and starts to melt their surroundings. I don't know if they applied sunscreen with 100 SPF of plot armor, but wouldn't they just get liquidated here? If their surroundings are melting, why aren't they also melting? I can't overstate enough that they got blasted back by an energetic cosmic force that's holding together a wormhole. Surviving a Demogorgon is one thing, but this is on another tier entirely. You'd probably have to be like Captain Marvel to survive this blast, and even that would probably damage her.
It's all very realistic.
Since people aren't prone to melting, Nancy and Jonathan fall through the roof into this room and try to get out. The overall rules for how the exotic matter melts its surroundings is very inconsistent in the regards of range and what it melts. Like, Dustin and Steve are lower in the building, but the staircase they're walking up is melting so they can't get to them. While for Nancy and Jonathan, who are in the room right under the ball of exotic matter, only the roof is melting and not the table in the room or the entire room. Just seems like an inherently vague plot device so that the Duffer Brothers can pick and choose what melts and how that impacts our characters, and not enough to kill them. Nancy and Jonathan get marooned on the table and have a very long dialogue scene. So long, in fact, that the white goo hardens. I sure do love me lucky breaks. Elle, Hopper, and Callie are by the wall when the wave of energy hits it, and Steve's car punctures a hole into space. Physics-wise, the scene is kind of funny because the force of the vacuum is so great that it's ripping trees out of the ground, but the characters can just walk past the vacuum as if it's just really windy. Not even space can kill these people.
You're a monster! A disgusting monster!
Holly! If you don't come back with me right now and rejoin the other children, I will have no choice but to hurt Max.
Considering that Henry threatened to kill Derek's family in a gruesome way, I don't know why he isn't doing the same to Holly here. That would be an easy way to take her back in because no child would want their family to be brutally murdered. Like, maybe taking Mike at the end of episode 4 could have been useful. I don't know. Vecna is literally getting bullied by children here. It just comes across as pathetic for what's supposed to be this show's main villain. I'll be very cross with you if you don't come out of the cave.
There are now other ways to get to you.
why would he say that? He's revealing an ace up his sleeve and is admitting that this safe haven is no longer secure. And unsurprisingly, Max and Holly act on this information. This wasn't even a mind game coming from Henry to lure them out or anything. He's just telling them his plan so we, the audience, know it. Thank you, Netflix, for this brain rot exposition.
Okay, it's very dark.
But not totally. You see that cutout of light? It's in the same shape as the cave entrance. I think the cap is a map. A map Henry made when he was young, a map that'll lead us to some kind of secret location.
Holy shit, Holly is locked in right now. This is crazily accurate for a 10-year-old. Just don't remember that she wasn't smart enough to see through Henry's lies without Max's help a few episodes ago. These kids are either geniuses or drooling babies, depending on what the Duffer Brothers need them to do. While down in the mines, Holly and Max discover Henry's traumatic memory, and for certain plot reasons, we, the Duffer Brothers, don't want to reveal this twist yet. We gotta save that for the finale for maximum emotional impact. Hurry, Holly! The integral piece of information is unraveling before us! We have to get out of here!
Make no mistake, boy.
So Vecna uses Will to find out where Max is, but does he really need him? I thought he had the ability to stalk his victims from afar, or if he can't locate Max specifically despite her already being one of his victims, he should be able to use basic deduction skills that Max should be in a coma, and that would imply her probably being in a hospital. Also, Vecna can be doing far more with Will, like finding the radio tower where everyone currently is. The Demogorgons Vecna used in episode 4, I guess, never returned from the vacation he sent them on, when he could be sending them to the radio tower to solve all of his problems. This plot point is directly establishing that Vecna is now trying to kill our characters in the real world, but he's going about it in such a comically incompetent way. What a joke of a villain, or God forbid he goes to the radio tower himself while Will is incapacitated.
Fine. I'll do it myself.
Alright, Will, you've served your purpose to me. I should fry your brain given that you now possess an overpowered ability, but I'm going to leave you alive and allow Elle a chance to save you.
Vicky! The Earth has split in 4. The military has taken over our town. Is what I'm saying really so insane?
That shit!
Vecna deploys the demo dogs into the hospital to take out Max. The first interaction Robin has with the demo dog kind of betrays the logic established after this, where these puppies are beelining Max, so this opening really dramatic and slow reveal is a little silly since the demo dog shouldn't be doing this. Like, they literally run past Robin and Vicky 20 seconds after devouring the soldiers. Lucas, while taking Max to the basement, gets rushed by a demo dog and he delivers a legendary front kick. This moment is crazy because this doggo is full sprinting at Lucas. That thing probably weighs more than he does, but somehow, the force of his kick can full stop its momentum and shoot it back. And this isn't even bringing up that Lucas is holding Max. He's not in a position to deliver a powerful kick like that. This moment very much gives off the vibes of the director hand-waving this moment and declaring that, it'll look fine in post. The demo dogs find the gang in the basement and Robin naturally requests, "Hey Lucas, can you turn off the loud music so that these monsters don't find and kill us?" To which he says, "No." He's putting all 3 of their lives on the line for the possibility of Max coming back at that moment. Would it really hurt to turn it off for a few minutes to hopefully hide from the demo dogs and then turn it back on? Because, you know, Lucas also needs to protect Max's physical body. Imagine coming back only for you to then get devoured by demo dogs. Thankfully though, after having a lengthy couple days to heal her life-ending wounds, Karen Wheeler comes in to save the day. Someone get that lady a wine bottle. However, her weapon of choice this time is a pressurized cylinder that she puts into a laundry machine. How she was able to quickly get out after pressing the button is anyone's guess given her condition, and maybe she has the speed force. Anyways, the demo dogs go over to investigate the noise and are very intrigued. I'm not sure why they stare at it for so long because there's clearly no one in there and we technically don't know exactly how these monsters see things. But all of this conveniently happens so that the canister somehow explodes in there and kills the demo dogs. which canonically now, Karen is one of the strongest characters in the show from her sheer feats and accomplishments. Most characters have not killed or gravely injured this many monsters from the Upside Down.
Are you saying that Holly is trapped under a steel plate?
Damn, even her vocal cords are healed. I want whatever healing juice she had. Thankfully, logic kicks back into the narrative, and Vicky and Mike tell Karen that, yo, you're not in any condition to go on this adventure with us. But it's their loss because she's basically a badass, indestructible girl boss now. It runs in the family. After escaping from Vecna's mind, Holly wakes up in the abyss and rips the hive mind tendril out of her mouth, immediately coughing up and excising all the Mind Flayer's smoke. This is extremely convenient because wasn't this a huge season-long conflict for Will? The smoke had to be burned out of his system, and now it just comes out right away. Yet another nerf for the Mind Flayer that could simply be controlling all of these kids like Will. While pursuing Holly, Vecna decides to Ara farm by slowly walking after her and lets her go into the Upside Down. Given what's established after this, where Vecna force pulls her from extremely far away while Holly is skydiving, why can't he do that here? He's way closer relative to that moment. It's as if he's trolling her, and this feels like a forced way to confirm to our characters that the abyss is in the sky. Also, it just occurred to me that shouldn't the gravity of the abyss create its own walkable surface in the Upside Down? Why would that only apply to Earth? Because these are two different planets, each with their own pull of gravity. You won't just fall down the wormhole, that's not how space works. A planet with gravity is what creates the sensation of walking on a surface. The way the Duffer Brothers present this wormhole, it would probably have an equilibrium point in the center where the gravity from both worlds would equally pull you in either direction, possibly making you float in the middle. This may be too sciencey and most casual viewers definitely don't care about this, but funnily enough, if the physics worked in this way, that would now make the plan they have for accessing the abyss much easier. Because instead of getting lucky where there happens to be a rift at the exact tip of the tower that they climb into, now they wait for the gravitational pull to meet them at the top of the tower, and then they deploy a rope and rappel down onto the surface of the abyss. Now, in regards to the science, I could be blatantly wrong and there's an astrophysicist in the comments correcting me. But this change not only theoretically increases the realism, it also makes their goal more achievable.
She told her I kidnapped you.
What? You rescued us.
I know.
It's never established that these kids have actually seen the monsters that Henry claims are in Hawkins, since if they remembered their kidnapping, then they wouldn't trust Henry. The only example we see of Henry psychologically manipulating someone is when Derek crosses a line, insinuating that all the other kids are just taking Henry at his word. This even gets to a point where these kids believe Henry over Holly, someone they've known for years in school. But this random imaginary creep is obviously more credible and trustworthy than our friend who has no nefarious reason to lie to us. This devolves even further where they straight up start fighting, and everything surrounding this plotline boils my brain. Mike casually makes a bomb, which is definitely normal and is kind of funny because he doesn't even know what a flare gun is. Our characters somehow have access to flamethrowers, Murray out here putting in overtime, and Will summons everyone with great urgency to tell them that he's gay. This scene has been heavily criticized, and for good reason because of how awkward its placement is. We're gearing up to save the world, and the scene holds all of that momentum. This is a big character moment, but the world is about to end. All the scene makes you think is, shouldn't these characters have more important things to do? It's also not like Will coming out here really affects the plot in the sense that him overcoming his fear of Vecna allows him to do something more significant. This moment implies that Will is going to play a major part in the final battle, and all he does is partially help Elle from really far away. That's it. Overcoming his fear was inconsequential, and if anything, he was way more heroic in episode 5. He already conquered his fear. Writing and pacing wise for Will coming out, moving the scene to say after graduation when everyone is together would make more sense. There's now no more plot urgency and the focus is fully on Will, so everyone accepts and loves him for who he is before going their own separate ways. It's time for the ultimate finale and the beginning action of our rambunctious souped up plot armor group of heroes, is to do a full-on assault on the military base. Who's gonna win, Rambo, Nancy, or the military? And with how overpowered everyone is, the military doesn't stand a chance. Joking aside, this scene is insane. Opening with Murray dying from all these soldiers mag dumping into the driver's seat, and everyone in the back of the truck would be turned into Swiss cheese from all the bullets flying through there. Because thin metal doesn't stop bullets. This is a general trope that filmmakers regularly use where bullets don't pass through certain objects, but in episode 2, that doesn't apply. Then this is tame honestly in comparison to what happens next, where Nancy solos 5 military soldiers. She never even ducks to take cover, she's simultaneously challenging everyone in the base. One of the soldiers even has elevation on her, and under normal circumstances, would be able to easily kill her. Maybe her radiating girl boss energy is blinding everyone where she's a walking, endlessly exploding flashbang. In essence, for this scene, I think this highlights a general laziness in the writing in terms of coming up with tangible and creative solutions. These characters are just bum rushing in with no consequences. Or I guess the Duffer Brothers just wanted a mind-numbing artificial action scene to end episode 7 on. Declaring that all of your characters are invulnerable right before the main event is quite the brilliant writing choice, when they could, as always, go through one of the metal band-aids. Something they just did, by the way. It's interesting how so many realistic solutions intrinsically keep tying back to that. Lieutenant Ackers awaits Hopper's party at Hawkins' lab after discovering they were here last episode, and for the convenience of the plot, he refuses to notify Sarah Connor to not send backup. For how dangerous Elle and Hopper are, that should override any kind of feud he has with his superior. Of course though, any kind of logic here will immediately be dropkicked by the fact that these characters wouldn't stand a chance with all of these soldiers stopping them. And while we're here, they actively get up and start pursuing them, and somehow Elle is allowed to do her thing uninterrupted for 30 minutes. It's as if the Duffer Brothers hit pause on them for this whole duration, and ironically, calling for backup and waiting would make their sudden absence make more sense. Then, you could have Lieutenant Ackers get impatient and want to go in before Hopper, Elle, Callie, and Murray leave the building, leading to what happens in the show and solving this writing issue where they disappear for a very long time.
We went into production without having a finished script for the finale.
We are shooting episode 8, which isn't completely written yet, so we don't even fully know what's going on.
Given that the final episode's script wasn't even finished before filming started, I think we're about to find a lot of writing mistakes and oversights. I've already touched on the absurdity of the tower getting crushed plot point, so let's address the Abyss, where I have a couple things I want to get off my chest about this place. The first one is oxygen. What is producing it on this planet? Is the Mind Flayer farting it out everywhere? For a scientific refreshment, oxygen is produced as a byproduct of photosynthesis, and that comes from general plant life. The Abyss is barren. It's basically Mars, and that planet doesn't have oxygen. Unless we happen to be in a deserty canyon area and the rest of the planet is composed of forest and an ocean. Then the bigger issue of the two, and this is a very widely pointed to one, where are the Demogorgons? You know, the alien life on this planet?
There have to be some monsters in the Abyss.
I agree.
There has to be Demogorgon, bat, dog, like something.
Yeah, I guess like I maybe wonder about demo fatigue at the...
Yeah, I mean, that's fair.
Demo fatigue is an insane statement. Imagine if any other franchise used that excuse. Stormtrooper fatigue? White Walker fatigue? Oh wait, that actually happened. You're just deleting antagonists from your narrative for the sole purpose of making an obstacle easier to overcome. When you have to redact so much shit from your story for it to have any semblance of plausibility, then you need to question your status as a writer. Additionally, everyone is focused on Vecna, but did they all collectively forget about the Mind Flayer? The arguably much more dangerous entity that is made out of gas? How does this not come up in any kind of conversation? So, you could say this plan of theirs has some cataclysmic holes in it, and the writers, or I should say the Duffer Brothers for this episode, seem to have writing fatigue. In Henry's mind, Elle stages a situation where Vecna reveals his true intentions in front of the kids, while Callie hides them nearby. They finally believe he's a monster and get out of the house. Surprisingly, in this scene, Callie lets Henry finish the process of looking into Elle's mind, revealing their entire plan to him. This should be seen as devastating because now Henry should know that there's a party of people in the Abyss coming to his location, to which he'd easily have the ability to intercept them with a plethora of monsters that should be at his disposal. If we, the audience, have demo fatigue, then use the bats that mysteriously vanished after season 4. Choosing to not do that, Vecna opts for psychologically manipulating Hopper to shoot at him, and behind Vecna is the sensory deprivation tank that contains Elle. It turns out that Hopper shooting it and hitting Elle was actually an illusion and she didn't die. But in that case, where did the bullets go if he shot directly at it? Did they bounce off the thin metal like earlier with the truck? Did they pierce the deprivation tank but miraculously didn't strike Elle? Feels a bit cheap that we did 2 massive fake-out deaths back to back, and it doesn't stop there because there's another one in the finale. Callie is the only character that's allowed to die in this massively bloating whale carcass of a cast. Another thing that relates to this scene is Vecna finally inserting himself as an obstacle to our characters. This is only the second and last time this villain personally intervenes, which seems ridiculous. Outside of all the Scooby-Doo shenanigans that happens in his mind, he can be doing so much more, and it feels like this season is out to make Vecna seem as toothless and incompetent as possible. There's even another moment later where Henry does this arm extending power while grabbing Holly that could have been handy multiple times earlier. And Derek apparently is stronger and pulls Holly out of Vecna's grasp. Henry's even getting clowned on by delightful Derek now. We're so cooked. Henry overcomes his fear of the caves because the Duffer Brothers are now allowing him to. And because he's in emotional turmoil, he doesn't have the ability to run after the kids and can only pursue them with a brisk walking speed. Just like Jason Voorhees. Since Elle fulfilled her function in the plot, that now gives the military the green light to come into Hawkins' lab. Really, the only moment here that's pretty silly is Hopper taking on 6 soldiers at once and winning. But the thing I find hilarious is that Hopper uses someone as a body shield to stop bullets, while simultaneously getting a collateral kill, showing that bullets do in fact pass through bodies. While making sure Callie is okay, Lieutenant Acker manifests right next to Hopper without making a sound and knocks him out. They interrogate him as to where Elle is, and coincidentally right when Acker is about to shoot Callie, down to the microsecond, Murray explodes the helicopter, making it seem like Lieutenant Ackers initially misses, which would have made me put a hole in my wall, and thankfully, a character finally dies. Even though Callie just got reintroduced a few episodes ago, and no one likes her. Finally, we arrive at the main course, which is the Mind Flayer fight. From strictly a premise standpoint, this climax is obviously fucking bananas. Teens and young adults killing a Leviathan god with some Molotovs and guns should be physically impossible. This simply comes down to something that's unachievable from a power level perspective. Breaking this rule blatantly shows how forced the writing is, and the only way to write something like this is to not put your characters in this situation. Doing so demolishes the reputation of the villain, and all the while the writing is extremely low effort, where our characters aren't even doing anything that intelligent to bridge this massive power level gap. The fact that a Demogorgon causes them more trouble than a cosmic Godzilla is mind-boggling. Also, not only do these characters overcome Spiderzilla, they kill it in 4 minutes flat after Elle enters the Mind Flayer's body. That's not an exaggeration, they kill it in 4 minutes, with Molotovs and guns. Absolute insanity, and let's just start going through the scene more in depth. I like the notion that Vecna was getting bullied by children only to abruptly get pulled out and faceplant onto the ground. Oh, and how courteous of Elle to let her opponent get back on his feet and to have a proper fight. It's not like the fate of the entire world is riding on her killing Vecna, and she should take any advantage she can get. Everyone outside comes up with a plan to lure in the Mind Flayer to this canyon area and surround it and chip away at its weak points. I'm glad that we're working off of video game logic, and this is also assuming it even has weak points. The craziest thing about this plan is the notion that everyone needs to climb up this canyon in under a minute. Like, this wide shot clearly shows that it would take a pretty long time to do so, and no one here has experience with rock climbing. But yeah, don't worry, Nancy, we'll go up on top of that canyon in a jiff. Then there's also the part of this plan where Nancy has to run across this entire field and somehow outrun roided out Shelob.
I don't even know what a chase looks like. It'll outrun them so quickly.
Looking at this wide shot, it'd definitely be able to catch her, and to get around this, the Duffer Brothers cut back to Elle fighting Vecna to not make this moment seem as comical. Nancy, by the divine will of the editor, gets to the canyon before getting squashed, and thankfully, she's wearing an invisible helmet because there's rocks and boulders flying around everywhere that would smash in her skull. For the Elle versus Vecna fight, a big aspect that turns the tide here is the usage of fire, and this affects Vecna because he's attached to the hive mind. As raised earlier, the portrayal of fire affecting everything connected to the hive mind is extremely inconsistent, and this entire final moment hinges on Will intervening. However, the Duffer Brothers are hoping that the audience flat out forgets that Will should also be affected by the fire and not be able to help Elle. He'd be on the ground writhing in pain like in episode 4. This establishes now that the Duffer Brothers are deleting crucial character weaknesses to fundamentally make the plot function. So the gang douses the Mind Flayer with fire. Nancy's shotgun is shockingly effective against the kaiju. Keep in mind, bullets earlier didn't pass through thin metal, and Steve and Dustin are underneath this fleshy skyscraper stabbing its underside, which would most likely result in them getting squished like ants, and they should not be down there. With that, the Mind Flayer is properly cooked.
Give me some of the pain and let me die.
Killing the physical manifestation of a Lovecraftian god in 4 minutes is all but one abysmally insane writing decision, and there are so many other deeply flawed layers of this climax. But hey, don't think about that. The aura of our heroes is so badass and epic, and the soundtrack is going hyperbolic. Surely this will all distract you from seeing anything wrong with the writing as we fully evolve into the superhero genre. Or honestly, superhero movies are way more grounded and realistic within their fictional context. Stranger Things is treating its characters like the Avengers when they're just kids from the suburbs. Which, yes, this is a fun tale about a ragtag team going on an adventure like the Goonies or E.T., but in those movies, they clearly don't kill fucking Godzilla in the end. After rescuing the kids, they all cough up the Mind Flayer smoke that shoots into the sky, which seems to insinuate that the gaseous Mind Flayer is still out there. Not sure why it doesn't act right now, because it's on the precipice of losing, and what the hell are our characters going to do against a smoke monster? It makes no sense why the gaseous Mind Flayer was such a constant presence in the past, and then it never shows up again after season 3, which is baffling from a writing perspective because the audience loved that iteration of the Mind Flayer, unless if the Duffer Brothers are deploying their writing philosophy of getting fatigue of certain enemies, and thereby deleting them from the narrative. They're racking up a pretty big box of discarded toys at this point. Also, again, very convenient that all the smoke instantly comes out of everyone's systems. We love narrative consistency in this house, and imagine 12 possessed children fighting our characters. Oh, Vecna is still alive, and really the only reason why he's not dead is to give Joyce something to do. It's kind of like Arya's consolation prize without spoiling it for anyone who hasn't seen Game of Thrones, but at least in this context, Elle defeated him, and this is just an extra bonus.
How it all ends, I know you can't tell us, but did you know in your head when you did season 1?
No, because we thought...
You say yes
when
someone
it's
asks.
too late, I've said no.
Everyone goes back to the Upside Down and loads into the truck after setting the wormhole to explode. Surprisingly, not a single person thinks, hey, we just killed half a dozen soldiers on our way in here. What are the chances they call for reinforcements and set a trap for us? Their escape is by no means secure, so yet again, we have another contrivance where these characters refuse to go through one of the metal band-aids, and the Duffer Brothers specifically need the plot point of them getting ambushed to happen so they can do Elle's ambiguous death. It's just an oversight that's even more amplified by the fact that no one is thinking a few minutes ahead. Not even Brainiac Dustin can see this coming. Then for the capture, Ella's in the back of the truck with everyone else, and in this shot, she's clearly been caught and her powers are also disabled, by the way. So getting out of this situation without causing any disruption would be almost impossible. This seemingly supports Mike's theory about Callie granting her invisibility, but the main problem with that theory is, how the hell did Callie survive this entire time with a bullet in her gut? Did they leave her half dead in agony at Hawkins? If she was miraculously still alive, how would she even have enough power to do this given her state? Not to mention the fact that her power has a range limit. They're not even in the Upside Down anymore. The Callie theory was always something I assumed was wishful thinking coming from Mike due to the insane impracticality of it. However, with Elle somehow silently getting away from the soldiers holding her, it seems to now be heavily implied that Callie is somehow, some way, intervening. Or the Duffer Brothers are teleporting characters around, who fucking knows at this point. Elle dies, quote unquote, and now that she's no longer here, the military piece out of the narrative. It's okay, Hopper and Nancy, we don't care that you've killed dozens of soldiers. Under any normal story with tangible consequences, Nancy and Hopper would be thrown into the deepest hole of a prison where they'd spend the rest of their lives. Obviously though, that's too morbid for Stranger Things, so we the writers are going to opt to create a massive plot hole that is more or less a retcon from how abruptly the military vanishes. Or I don't know, you could have a brief scene where Sarah Connor's superior comes in, reprimands her, and thanks everyone for saving the world, assuring to give out pardons to everyone involved. To clarify, I don't like this development that I'm pitching myself as it operates as a cop-out, but it's better than the alternative. Just an attempt to fix one of the many writing problems of the final episode.
I feel like we tried very much to answer everything and not leave any loose ends. So as Ross said, you can watch it from beginning to end without it being frustrating.
After this, all that's left is the epilogue, and I honestly really enjoyed it. Got to me emotionally, the writing finally feels normal since there aren't 20 people in every scene, and all the endings were warm and touching. There's only a couple problems with this epilogue that need to be addressed, like Murray being notably absent. Poor guy carried the whole team with his legendary support, and he doesn't even get mentioned. Could have been as simple as a line from Hopper's scene with Joyce like, "Oh, Murray moved to New York to be a private investigator." Then, out of all of the characters, I feel like at least one of them should have died, and this is a widely debated topic. And I'm personally leaning towards Jonathan. Primarily because out of all the endings, his film nerd endpoint felt a bit abrupt. Like, I know he had an interest in photography, but it doesn't feel like he's had much personal character growth outside of his relationship with Nancy. Furthermore, having one of the older characters die essentially gives them a strong emotional and deep reason to stay connected. It's not just out of friendship, but remembering Jonathan for his sacrifice. A lot of people predicted Steve, which could also work in a sense. However, his ending I think was great, along with him being a pretty big red herring. You may also say that, oh, they already killed a character in Elle. And if you're not familiar with this trope, whenever a character doesn't physically and explicitly die on screen, then there's a very high chance they're still alive. Especially since Netflix has a certain money incentive in wanting to keep this character alive for any potential legacy sequel. Even season 3 of this same show used that trope with Hopper, so I'd be shocked if she actually died. With that out of the way, that ends this legendary Devoid of Logic campaign. I'm sure there are plenty of other issues I didn't touch on despite this video being over an hour, and let me know in the comments what those are. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I have plenty of other fun Devoid of Logic videos on my channel, and my Discord, Letterboxd, and Patreon links are in the description. Thanks to my consistent and supporting top patron, Logan Farmer.